On Monday, when Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath spoke about population imbalance and religious demography, it triggered opposition parties. You don't need to hear from me how they reacted. They're so predictable, in fact. For the opposition parties, Yogi Adityanath has always been a polarizing figure, and so they always see his comments in the same Hindu Muslim binary. So it was expected. I'm not here to talk about who is right or who is wrong here. In this episode of Politically Correct, I'm going to share with you what the UPCM's close aides, bureaucrats, and politicians had to tell me when I met them in Lucknow recently. But let me first tell you something about what happened in Hyderabad after the BJP National Executive Meeting. It got over on the 3rd of July. So, the BJP Minority Morcha chief, Jamal Siddiqui, was in fact, he was in for a surprise after the meeting ended. Yogi Adityanath walked up to him, sat beside him, and got a picture clicked together. The two were then seen engrossed in a conversation. Some leaders who overheard a bit of their conversation told me later that Yogi was asking Jamal Siddiqui about the Minority Morcha's plans in UP. Just a few hours before that, Yogi had addressed the national executive, saying his party colleagues how Muslims, especially women, were voting for the BJP in UP. BJP leaders are obviously surprised to see the UP chief minister's new avatar, somebody who has started showing interest in reaching out to Muslims. For his political rivals, Yogi has always been anti-Muslim. And they got more ammunition when he unleashed the police on those protesting against the citizenship law, and when he sent bulldozers to Muslims' houses. It was in this backdrop that I visited the Lok Bhavan, the CM's office in Lucknow. Those working closely with him looked rather upset, when I visited them. One of them told me, Delhi media sees everything about Yogi ji in Hindu-Muslim binary. And why don't you go to the streets and talk to the people? You will see how wrong you are. Well, I didn't go to the streets to talk to the people. After all, they gave him a renewed mandate only a few months back. So I decided to stick around in the CMO to get a sense of what his close aides think about his politics. Frankly, I was a bit surprised to hear what they had to say, to hear their version. For instance, a close aide of the CM told me that Yogi was hoping to get more votes from Muslim women in the last assembly elections because of the welfare schemes of the government, because of the triple talaq law, which criminalized triple talaq. Yogi had apparently told that aide that if there was no hijab controversy in Karnataka, the BJP would have got at least 10% more votes from Muslim women. You remember that viral video clip in which a hijab-clad Mandya student, Muskan, she was chanting Allahu Akbar while a crowd of people were kind of following her, shouting Jai Shri Ram. I was told Yogi Adityanath was quite upset about that incident. He apparently told some of his close aides in a meeting that, she's just a child. What do you expect her to do when you wave gamcha at her and shout Jai Shri Ram? It was totally unnecessary. Our Hindu women also wear ghungat when they see elderly men in their homes. These things will stop once women get educated. Well, I don't know how many of you would believe that Yogi said such things, but this is what I was told, and I'm just relaying it to you. Other officials in the CMO narrated another story. Yogi, before he became the chief minister, he was once sifting through marriage invitations that people usually send to Gorakhnath temple. He picked one from the bunch of cards. It was sent by a former Congress legislator, a Muslim. Yogi Adityanath decided to attend it. And as I was told by one of his aides, the congressman was apparently overwhelmed to see him there, see Yogi Adityanath there. I know these stories don't really square with the Yogi Adityanath's image. Later, when I met, Navneet Sahgal, he's Additional Chief Secretary, Information and MSME, and when I met him in the Lok Bhavan, my first question was, how do you explain bulldozers demolishing Muslims' houses? I mean, the most recent incident was, they in Prayagraj, where one Javed Ahmad's house was demolished. Navneet Struggle just looked at me, and then, with a very indifferent face, he's saying, I mean, that's because the media is distorting facts. He then gave me a document that had details of the notices that had been sent to Javed Ahmad. Then Sehgal tells me, all these demolitions are as per law. All procedures have been followed. By the way, how come Delhi media doesn't see bulldozers raising illegal farmhouses on the Yamuna's flood banks in Noida? I mean, what he was suggesting was that we in the media were not actually interested in Noida demolitions, because those affected there were Hindus. Anyway, I'm used to hearing these jibes, so that was okay. Navneet Sehgal was more interested in talking about the UP Chief Minister's $1 trillion economy goal. I mean, as it is, the UP government had, as you know, invited bids to appoint a consultant to prepare the roadmap for the $1 trillion economy. 7 companies have bidded so far. I mean, for this, in fact, they're all big names: Deloitte, Grant Thornton, Boston Consultancy Group, BCG, Invest India, and so on and so forth. So the government is presently examining those bid documents. Sehgal, in fact, listed a host of labor reforms and other initiatives that the Yogi government has taken to attract investments into the state. There are already some big ticket investors: Infosys, Adani, Reliance, Microsoft, Samsung, and you name it. Sehgal just underlined what Yogi Adityanath 2.0 is all about. And let me quote him here. Yogi 2.0 is about development, employment, and infrastructure. We need to make UP a $1 trillion economy by 2027. For that, UP needs to grow at 20%. And that is why law and order becomes so important. When industries know that that UP has no law and order problem, they'll come and invest. And that's what Navneet Sehgal was saying. I was a bit apprehensive, of course, because I told him that experts have been saying that this $1 trillion economy target is very difficult to achieve. The UP government's advanced estimates of GSDP for 2021-22, I mean, that stands at $254 billion. So it will have to grow fourfold in the next 5 years to make UP a $1 trillion economy. But Sehgal was confident. He said, why not? Many other countries have grown very fast. UP can also do it. Then he went on saying that, how UP is number 2 in India's ease of doing business ranking. We are not, as he said, we are not number 1 because we did not have commercial courts. We are setting them up now. Basically, he was trying to tell me how the government is preparing to, attract investment and all the steps that the government has taken to reach that target of making UP a $1 trillion economy. And in fact, this subject, this $1 trillion economy remained a common refrain. I mean, whoever met there. So when I visited the police headquarters to meet Prashant Kumar, he is the Additional Director General, Law and Order, and he was also talking about it. I mean, just like Sehgal is the face of Yogi's CMO, Prashant Kumar is the face of the UP police. And when I met him, my first question was, how come the UP police targets only Muslim dons? I mean, I talked about Atiq Ahmed in Prayagraj, I talked about Mukhtar Ansari in Ghazipur. Prashant Kumar is obviously dismissive. And let me quote him here. He said, we will make UP out of bounds for criminals, be it Hindus or Muslims. The ultimate objective is to provide an environment where investors feel totally safe. I mean, later on I learned that, that was what I said I was just quoting Prashant Kumar. Later I learned that, Yogi Adityanath himself monitors day-to-day developments when it comes to law and order. So around 9:30 in the evening, 9:30 p.m. every day, before he retires for the day, Yogi holds a review meeting with the, Additional Chief Secretary, ACS Home, the DGP, then, Prashant Kumar, of course. There are some other senior officials. And the message I was told that Yogi keeps repeating in those meetings is, you have to have zero tolerance to crime. And Prashant Kumar, of course, when I met him, he was also talking about all this. Zero tolerance to crime. That looked like a buzzword there, sounded like a buzzword in the police headquarters. As it is, the UP police have identified 62 mafias, what they call. I mean, those involved in contract killing, extortion, liquor smuggling, etc. So Prashant Kumar was telling me that, these so-called mafias, they were constantly being monitored, and their economic empire was being destroyed. So most of these mafias, the listed mafias in the UP police documents, most of them are in jail, but their associates are outside, and they are now facing the heat from the UP police. Then again, my question, and they must have been upset because constantly I was bringing this Muslim issue into my conversation. So I was asking Prashant Kumar, okay, so you're talking about 62 mafias. How many of them are Muslims? Well, as if Prashant Kumar was expecting this question from me. He passed on a sheaf of papers towards me. It contained details of the so-called mafias. He said, see for yourself. We don't discriminate. So I randomly picked a page, where the names and the crimes of these people and the property seized, all the details were there. So I just, out of that sheaf of papers, I just picked up one. And the names went like, I'm just telling you the names on that page. It had 5 names. Rizwan Zavir, Devendra Singh, Sundar Bhati, Singaraj Bhati, Ankil Gujar, and Amit Kasana. Basically, I could see just one Muslim name. Then on another page, which I again picked up randomly, there were 3 names. Sanjeev Maheshwari, Akash Jat, and Munir. So Maheshwari was serving a life sentence, Jat was sentenced to 10 years in jail, 10 years of jail in 2 different cases, and Munir was given death sentence. The worth of their seized properties that I could see on that paper read like Maheshwari 4 crores, Jat 33 lakhs, Munir 35 lakhs. So basically, why he was telling all this was like, okay, if I suspected that, only Muslim mafias were being targeted, so here is the list. You see it for yourself. And yes, if you look at the list, most of them are Hindu names, as you can see, I've just told you. I couldn't have gone through all the pages. And so I had to randomly select, pick just 2 pages. And when I returned the document to him, the ADG was, trying to explain, that our goal is clear. We won't allow criminals to operate in UP. We have this absolutely zero tolerance to crime. And he went on. Anyway, so while the Chief Minister's office and the police headquarters, they make most of the headlines in UP today. A sense of urgency and purpose you could feel, in other government offices too. So the next day, I visited this place called Ganna Kisan Sansthan. Its office is in Dalibag. And there I met Sanjay Bhus Reddy, Additional Chief Secretary, Excise. When I reached there, I was busy in a marathon meeting. They were discussing how to develop wineries in UP. Finally, that meeting got over. And then he took some time out to meet me and explain how these wineries would help farmers to get the best price for their fruits. The fruits they produce, like mangoes, jamuns, grapes. Then he started talking about the new excise policy the UP government has brought. He said that our excise policy is the best in the country. And that was Bhus Reddy, of course. He's ACS excise. And in that policy, through that policy, the government is expecting to mop up around 41,000 crores. In terms of excise revenue in 2022-23. Anyway, I was more curious. I was curious about the, high-end stores that I could see in the city. Those stores were selling premium alcoholic beverages. And I was surprised because that was happening in a state run by a monk. And when I talked about it, Bhus Reddy was smiling. Well, Yogi ji didn't want any advertising or anything that would encourage drinking. Anyway, so that topic, I'm not getting into that topic. On a personal note, then I asked him, aren't you planning to return to Delhi and become a secretary to the government of India? I have known Bose Reddy since the days he was a joint secretary in the agriculture ministry in Delhi. And I thought, well, now he would be thinking of coming back. He would come back as a secretary. And so I took the liberty to ask that question. His reply. He said, I've got full job satisfaction here. There's so much to do. I can tell you, Yogi is the best thing that has happened to UP. Coming from a bureaucrat, and he's quite an upright officer. So, it might sound political, but the conviction he had, this job satisfaction, he was happy working in the UP government, although he has the option of coming back to Delhi as secretary. But he was happy he wouldn't come back. Well, that was Bose Reddy. That was my conversation with Bose Reddy. Later in the evening, I thought I should meet PWD Minister Jitin Prasad. It turned out to be quite a challenge. His official meetings went on till after 9 p.m. When I finally met him, I was a bit exasperated. I said, how difficult it is to catch a minister in Lucknow. Then I said, anyway, क्या gossip है Lucknow में? What's the gossip in Lucknow? And then his response was, यहाँ gossip नहीं, काम होता है. There is work, no gossip here. That was Jitin. He wasn't even smiling, and so I had to nod my head in agreement. And just to show that, well, I really believed him. And he then started listing his ministry's initiatives. Now, that was really boring, in fact. So, that was not the gossip I was looking forward to. So, I wanted to change the subject. And I asked him, why doesn't your family stay with you? He says, well, where is the time for the family? It's not the Manmohan Singh government. And Jitin was a minister in that government. Anyway, so he went on. It's not Manmohan Singh government. It's Yogi Adityanath government. Everybody has to work 24/7. It was a new Jitin Prasad. I had to wind up the conversation because, he had these early morning engagements. Why I'm sharing all these conversations with you is I'm just trying to give you an idea as to how the narrative in the corridors of power in Lucknow is. How that narrative is so different from what we hear about the Yogi government while sitting in Delhi or elsewhere. As you see, there is something different about bureaucrats and ministers in the Yogi 2.0 administration. While most of us, while the country is discussing UP's bulldozers and Muslims, those people have a trillion other priorities. Before I wind up, I must put a disclaimer here. I'm just sharing with you what ministers and bureaucrats told me in Lucknow. I'm not in a position to fact check. Because, when I wrote about my experience in Lucknow, there was a very interesting response on my Twitter handle. Somebody responded on Twitter. What was that? DK Singh gets the cut and we get the dirt. Well, what can I say about this? Anyway, that's all from me in this episode of Politically Correct. Thanks for watching.